Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, MH370, MH370, was an international passenger flight operated by Malaysia Airlines that disappeared from radar on the 8th of March 2014, while flying from Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia to its planned destination, Beijing Capital International Airport in China. The cause of its disappearance has not been determined. It is widely regarded as the greatest mystery in aviation history and remains the single deadliest case of aircraft disappearance. The crew of the Boeing 777-200ER, registered as 9MMRO, last communicated with Air Traffic Control, ATC, around 38 minutes after takeoff when the flight was over the South China Sea. The aircraft was lost from ATC's secondary surveillance radar screens minutes later but was tracked by the Malaysian military's primary radar system for another hour, deviating westward from its planned flight path. It left radar range 200 nautical miles, 370 kilometers, 230 mi, west-northwest of Penang Island in northwestern peninsular Malaysia. With all 227 passengers and 12 crew aboard presumed dead, the disappearance of Flight 370 was the deadliest incident involving a Boeing 777, the deadliest of 2014, and the deadliest in Malaysia Airlines history until it was surpassed in all three regards by Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 on the 17th of July 2014. Relying mostly on the analysis of data from the Inmarsat satellite with which the aircraft last communicated, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, ATSB, initially proposed that a hypoxia event was the most likely cause given the available evidence, although no consensus has been reached among investigators concerning this theory. At various stages of the investigation, possible hijacking scenarios were considered, including crew involvement and suspicion of the airplane's cargo manifest. Many disappearance theories regarding the flight have also been reported by the media. The search for the missing aircraft became the most expensive search in the history of aviation. It focused initially on the South China Sea and Andaman Sea, before a novel analysis of the aircraft's automated communications with an Inmarsat satellite indicated that the plane had traveled far southward over the southern Indian Ocean. Several pieces of debris washed ashore in the western Indian Ocean during 2015 and 2016. Many of these were confirmed to have originated from Flight 370. After a 3-year search across 120,000 square kilometers, 46,000 square miles, of ocean failed to locate the aircraft, the Joint Agency Coordination Center heading the operation suspended its activities in January 2017. A second search launched in January 2018 by private contractor Ocean Infinity also ended without success after 6 months. The Malaysian Ministry of Transport's final report from July 2018 was inconclusive. It highlighted Malaysian ATC's fruitless attempts to communicate with the aircraft shortly after its disappearance. In the absence of a definitive cause of disappearance, air transport industry safety recommendations and regulations citing Flight 370 have been implemented to prevent a repetition of the circumstances associated with the loss. These include increased battery life on underwater locator beacons, lengthening of recording times on flight data recorders and cockpit voice recorders, and new standards for aircraft position reporting over open ocean. Flight 370 last made voice contact with ATC at 1:19 MYT, the 8th of March, 1719 Coordinated Universal Time, the 7th of March, when it was over the South China Sea, less than an hour after takeoff. It disappeared from ATC radar screens at 1:22 MYT, but was still tracked on military radar as it turned sharply away from its original northeastern course to head west and cross the Malay Peninsula, continuing that course until leaving the range of the military radar at 2:22 while over the Andaman Sea, 200 nautical miles, 370 kilometers, 230 mi, northwest of Penang Island, in northwestern Malaysia. The multinational search effort for the aircraft, which was to become the most expensive aviation search in history, began in the Gulf of Thailand in the South China Sea, where the aircraft's signal was last detected on secondary surveillance radar, and was soon extended to the Strait of Malacca and Andaman Sea. Analysis of satellite communications between the aircraft and Inmarsat's satellite communications network concluded that the flight continued until at least 8:19, nearly an hour after Malaysia Airlines publicly announced the plane's loss, and flew south into the southern Indian Ocean, although the precise location cannot be determined. Australia assumed charge of the search on the 17th of March, when the search effort began to emphasize the southern Indian Ocean. On the 24th of March, the Malaysian government noted that the final location determined by the satellite communication was far from any possible landing sites, and concluded, Flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean. From October 2016 to January 2017, a comprehensive survey of 120,000 kilometers, 46,000 miles, of seafloor about 1,800 kilometers, 1,100 miles, 970 nmi, southwest of Perth, Western Australia, yielded no evidence of the aircraft. Several pieces of marine debris found on the coast of Africa and on Indian Ocean islands off the coast of Africa, the first of which was discovered on the 29th of July 2015 on Réunion, have been confirmed as pieces of Flight 370. The bulk of the aircraft has not been located, prompting many theories about its disappearance. In January 2018, a search by private U.S. marine exploration company Ocean Infinity began in the search zone around 35.6 degrees south 92.8 degrees east, the most likely crash site according to the drift study published in 2017. In a previous search attempt, Malaysia had established a joint investigation team, JIT, to investigate the incident, working with foreign aviation authorities and experts. Malaysia released a final report concerning Flight 370 on the 17th October 2017. Neither the crew nor the aircraft's communication systems relayed a distress signal, indications of bad weather, or technical problems before the aircraft vanished. 2 Iranian passengers traveling on stolen passports were investigated but eliminated as suspects. Malaysian police identified the captain as the prime suspect if human intervention was the cause of the disappearance, after clearing all others on the flight of suspicion over possible motives. Power was lost to the aircraft's satellite data unit, SDU, at some point between 1:07 and 2:03. The SDU logged onto Inmarsat's satellite communication network at 2:25, which was 3 minutes after the aircraft had left the range of radar. Based on analysis of the satellite communications, the aircraft was postulated to have turned south after passing north of Sumatra and then to have flown for 6 hours with little deviation in its track, ending when its fuel was exhausted. With the loss of all 239 lives on board, Flight 370 is the second deadliest incident involving a Boeing 777 and the second deadliest incident of Malaysia Airlines history, second to Flight 17 in both categories. Malaysia Airlines was struggling financially, a problem that was exacerbated by a decrease of ticket sales after the disappearance of Flight 370 and the downing of Flight 17. The airline was renationalized by the end of 2014. The Malaysian government received significant criticism, especially from China, for failing to disclose information promptly during the early weeks of the search. Flight 370's disappearance brought to public attention the limits of aircraft tracking and flight recorders, including the limited battery life of underwater locator beacons, an issue that had been raised about 4 years earlier following the loss of Air France Flight 447 but had never been resolved. In response to Flight 370's disappearance, the International Civil Aviation Organization adopted new standards for aircraft position reporting over open ocean, extended recording time for cockpit voice recorders, and, starting from 2020, new aircraft designs have been required to have a means of recovering the flight recorders, or the information they contain, before they sink into the water. Flight 370 was operated with a Boeing 777-2H6R, serial number 28420, registered as 9MMRO. The aircraft was delivered new to Malaysia Airlines on the 31st of May 2002. The aircraft was powered by 2 Rolls-Royce Trent 892 engines and configured to carry 282 passengers in total capacity. It had accumulated 53,471.6 hours and 7,526 cycles, takeoffs and landings, in service, and had not previously been involved in any major incidents, though a minor incident while taxiing at Shanghai Pudong International Airport in August 2012 resulted in a broken wing tip. Its last maintenance, a check, was carried out on the 23rd of February 2014. The aircraft was in compliance with all applicable airworthiness directives for the airframe and engines. A replenishment of the crew member oxygen system was performed on the 7th of March 2014, a routine maintenance task. An examination of this procedure found nothing unusual. 10 years after MH370's disappearance, however, leaked documents have shown that MH370 was given supplemental fuel and crew member oxygen supplies just before takeoff. The Boeing 777 was introduced in 1994 and has an excellent safety record. Since its first commercial flight in June 1995, the type has suffered only 6 other hull losses. 1. The crash of British Airways Flight 38 in 2008, 2. A cockpit fire in a parked Egyptair Flight 667 at Cairo International Airport in 2011, 3. The crash of Asiana Airlines Flight 214 in 2013, in which 3 people died, 4. Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, which was shot down over Ukraine, killing all 298 people aboard in July 2014. 5. Emirates Flight 521, which crashed and burned out while landing at Dubai International Airport in August 2016, killing one person. 6. And in November 2017, the seventh Boeing 777 hull loss occurred when a Singapore Airlines 777-200 was written off after catching fire and burning out at Singapore Changi Airport. The aircraft was carrying 12 Malaysian crew members and 227 passengers from 14 different nations. On the day of the disappearance, Malaysia Airlines released the names and nationalities of the passengers and crew, based on the flight manifest. The passenger list was later modified to include 2 Iranian passengers traveling on stolen Austrian and Italian passports. All 12 crew members, 2 pilots and 10 cabin crew, were Malaysian citizens. The pilot in command was 52-year-old Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah from Penang. He joined Malaysia Airlines as a cadet pilot in 1981, and after training and receiving his commercial pilot's license, he became a second officer with the airline in 1983. He was promoted to captain of the Boeing 737-400 in 1991, captain of the Airbus A330-300 in 1996, and captain of the Boeing 777-200 in 1998. He had been a type rating instructor and a type rating examiner since 2007. Zahari had a total of 18,365 hours of flying experience. The co-pilot was 26-year-old First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid. He joined Malaysia Airlines as a cadet pilot in 2007, after becoming a second officer of the Boeing 737-400. He was promoted to first officer of the Boeing 737-400 in 2010 and then transitioned to the Airbus A330-300 in 2012. In November 2013, he began training as first officer of the Boeing 777-200 aircraft. Flight 370 was his final training flight, and he was scheduled to be examined on his next flight. Farik had accumulated 2,763 hours of flying experience. Of the 227 passengers, 153 were Chinese citizens, including a group of 19 artists with 6 family members and 4 staff returning from a calligraphy exhibition of their work in Kuala Lumpur. 38 passengers were Malaysian. The remaining passengers were from 12 different countries. 20 passengers, 12 of whom were from Malaysia and 8 from China, were employees of Freescale Semiconductor. Through a 2007 agreement with Malaysia Airlines, Sukai, an international Buddhist organization, immediately sent specially trained teams to Beijing and Malaysia to give emotional assistance to passengers' families. The airline also sent its own team of caregivers and volunteers and agreed to bear the expense of bringing family members of the passengers to Kuala Lumpur and providing them with accommodation, medical care, and counseling. Altogether, 115 family members of the Chinese passengers flew to Kuala Lumpur. Some other family members chose to remain in China, fearing they would feel too isolated in Malaysia. Flight 370 was a scheduled flight in the early morning of Saturday, the 8th of March 2014, from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, to Beijing, China. It was one of 2 daily flights operated by Malaysia Airlines from its hub at Kuala Lumpur International Airport to Beijing Capital International Airport, scheduled to depart at 0:35 local time, MYT, UTC plus 8 o'clock, and arrive at 6:30 local time, CST, UTC plus 8 o'clock. On board were 2 pilots, 10 cabin crew, 227 passengers, and 14,296 kilograms, 31,517 lb, of cargo. The planned flight duration was 5 hours and 34 minutes, which would consume an estimated 37,200 kilograms, 82,000 lb, of jet fuel. The aircraft carried 49,100 kilograms, 108,200 lb, of fuel, including reserves, allowing an endurance of 7 hours and 31 minutes. The extra fuel was enough to divert to alternate airports, Jinan Yaocheng International Airport and Hangzhou Zhaoshan International Airport, which would require 4,800 kilograms, 10,600 lb, or 10,700 kilograms, 23,600 pounds, respectively, to reach from Beijing. At 0:42 MYT, Flight 370 took off from runway 32R, and was cleared by Air Traffic Control, ATC, to climb to flight level 180, approximately 18,000 feet, 5,500 meters, on a direct path to navigational waypoint IGARI, located at 6 degrees 56 minutes 12 seconds north, 103 degrees 35 minutes 6 seconds east. Voice analysis has determined that the first officer communicated with ATC while the flight was on the ground and that the captain communicated with ATC after departure. Shortly after departure, the flight was transferred from the airport's ATC to Lumpur radar on frequency 132.6 MHz. ATC over peninsular Malaysia and adjacent waters is provided by the Kuala Lumpur Area Control Center, ACC. Lumpur radar is the name of the frequency used for en route air traffic. At 046, Lumpur radar cleared Flight 370 to flight level 350, approximately 35,000 feet, 10,700 meters. At 1:01, Flight 370's crew reported to Lumpur radar that they had reached flight level 350, which they confirmed again at 1:08. The aircraft's final transmission before its disappearance from radar was an automated position report, sent using the Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, ACARS, protocol at 1:06 MYT. Among the data provided in this message was the total fuel remaining, 43,800 kilograms, 96,600 lb. The last verbal signal to air traffic control occurred at 1 hour 19 minutes and 30 seconds, when Captain Zahari acknowledged a transition from Lumpur radar to Ho Chi Minh ACC. Lumpur radar. Malaysian 370. Contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. Flight 370. Good night. Malaysian 370. The crew was expected to check in with Ho Chi Minh Area Control Center as the aircraft entered Vietnamese airspace, shortly after the loss of radar and radio contact. Vietnamese controllers asked nearby aircraft to attempt to reach Flight 370 on the International Air Distress frequency. Still, none were able to establish confirmed communication. A report published in the early days of the search quoted one pilot describing faint, mumbling, and static, but this account was never verified and does not appear in the official investigation record. Calls made to the cockpit at 2:39 and 7:13 went unanswered, though the aircraft's satellite data unit acknowledged them. At 1 hour 20 minutes and 31 seconds MYT, Flight 370 was observed on radar at the Kuala Lumpur ACC as it passed the navigational waypoint IGARI, 6 degrees 56 minutes 12 seconds north 103 degrees 35 minutes 6 seconds east, in the Gulf of Thailand. 5 seconds later, the mode S symbol disappeared from radar screens. At 1 hour 21 minutes and 13 seconds, Flight 370 disappeared from the radar screen at Kuala Lumpur ACC and was lost at about the same time on radar at Ho Chi Minh ACC, which reported that the aircraft was at the nearby waypoint BITOD. Air traffic control uses secondary radar, which relies on a signal emitted by a transponder on each aircraft. Therefore, the ADS-B transponder was no longer functioning on Flight 370 after 1:21. The final transponder data indicated that the aircraft was flying at its assigned cruise altitude of flight level 350 and was traveling at 471 knots, 872 km per hour, 542 miles per hour, true airspeed. There were few clouds around this point, and there was no rain or lightning nearby. Later analysis estimated that Flight 370 had 41,500 kilograms, 91,500 lb, of fuel when it disappeared from secondary radar. At the time that the transponder stopped functioning, the Malaysian military's primary radar showed Flight 370 turning right, but then beginning a left turn to a southwesterly direction. From 1 hour 30 minutes and 35 seconds until 1:35, military radar showed Flight 370 at 35,700 feet, 10,900 meters, on a 231 degrees magnetic heading, with a ground speed of 496 knots, 919 kilometers per hour. 571 miles per hour. Flight 370 continued across the Malay Peninsula, fluctuating between 31,000 and 33,000 feet, 9,400 and 10,100 meters, in altitude. A civilian primary radar at Sultan Ismail Petra Airport with a 60 nmi, 110 kilometers, 69 mi, range made 4 detections of an unidentified aircraft between 1 hour 30 minutes and 37 seconds and 1 hour 52 minutes and 35 seconds. The tracks of the unidentified aircraft are consistent with those of the military data. At 1:52, Flight 370 was detected passing just south of the island of Penang. From there, the aircraft flew across the Strait of Malacca, passing close to the waypoint Vampi and Pulau Perak at 2:03, after which it flew along air route N571 to waypoints Mekar, Nilam, and possibly IGOGU. The last known radar detection, from a point near the limits of Malaysian military radar, was at 2:22, 10 nmi, 19 kilometers, 12 mi, after passing waypoint Mekar. which is 237 nmi, 439 kilometers, 273 mi, from Penang, and 247.3 nmi, 458.0 kilometers, 284.6 miles, northwest of Penang Airport at an altitude of 29,500 feet, 9,000 meters. Countries were reluctant to release information collected from military radar because of sensitivity about revealing their capabilities. Indonesia has an early warning radar system, but its ATC radar did not register any aircraft with the transponder code used by Flight 370, despite the aircraft possibly having flown near, or over, the northern tip of Sumatra. Indonesian military radar tracked Flight 370 earlier when en route to waypoint IGARI before the transponder is thought to have been turned off, but did not provide information on whether it was detected afterwards. Thailand and Vietnam also detected Flight 370 on radar before the transponder stopped working. The radar position symbols for the transponder code used by Flight 370 vanished after the transponder is thought to have been turned off. Vietnam's Deputy Minister of Transport Pham Khai Thieu stated that Vietnam had noticed MH370 turning back toward the west and that its operators had twice informed Malaysian authorities the same day on the 8th of March. Thai military radar detected an aircraft that might have been Flight 370, but it is not known at what time the last radar contact was made, and the signal did not include identifying data. Also, the flight was not detected by Australia's conventional system or its long-range Joint Over-the-Horizon radar system, which has an official range of 3,000 kilometers, 1,900 miles. The latter was not in operation on the night of the disappearance. At 1:38 MYT, Ho Chi Minh Area Control Center, ACC, contacted Kuala Lumpur Area Control Center to query the whereabouts of Flight 370 and informed Kuala Lumpur that ACC had not established verbal communication with Flight 370, which was last detected by radar at waypoint BITOD. The two centers exchanged 4 more calls during the next 20 minutes with no new information. At 2:03, Kuala Lumpur ACC relayed to Ho Chi Minh ACC information received from Malaysia Airlines Operations Center that Flight 370 was in Cambodian airspace. Ho Chi Minh ACC contacted Kuala Lumpur ACC twice in the following 8 minutes asking for confirmation that Flight 370 was in Cambodian airspace. At 2:15, the watch supervisor at Kuala Lumpur ACC queried Malaysia Airlines Operations Center, which said that it could exchange signals with Flight 370 and that Flight 370 was in Cambodian airspace. Kuala Lumpur ACC contacted Ho Chi Minh ACC to ask whether the planned flight path for Flight 370 passed through Cambodian airspace. Ho Chi Minh ACC responded that Flight 370 was not supposed to enter Cambodian airspace and that they had already contacted Phnom Penh ACC, which controls Cambodian airspace, which had no communication with Flight 370. Kuala Lumpur ACC contacted Malaysia Airlines Operations Center at 2:34, inquiring about the communication status with Flight 370, and were informed that Flight 370 was in a normal condition based on a signal download and that it was located at 14 degrees 54 in 109 degrees 15 E. Later, another Malaysia Airlines aircraft, Flight 386 bound for Shanghai, attempted, at the request of Ho Chi Minh ACC, to contact Flight 370 on the Lumpur radar frequency, the frequency on which Flight 370 last made contact with Malaysian air traffic control, and on emergency frequencies. The attempt was unsuccessful. At 3:30, Malaysia Airlines Operations Center informed Kuala Lumpur ACC that the locations it had provided earlier were based on flight projection and not reliable for aircraft positioning. Over the next hour, Kuala Lumpur ACC contacted Ho Chi Minh ACC asking whether they had signaled Chinese air traffic control. At 5:09, Singapore ACC was queried for information about Flight 370. At 5:20, an undisclosed official contacted Kuala Lumpur ACC requesting information about Flight 370. He opined that, based on known information, MH370 never left Malaysian airspace. The watch supervisor at Kuala Lumpur ACC activated the Kuala Lumpur Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center, ARCC, at 5:30, more than 4 hours after communication was lost with Flight 370. The ARCC is a command post at an area control center that coordinates search and rescue activities when an aircraft is lost. Malaysia Airlines issued a media statement at 7:24 MYT on the 8th of March, 1 hour after the scheduled arrival time of the flight at Beijing, stating that communication with the flight had been lost by Malaysian ATC at 2:40 and that the government had initiated search and rescue operations. Unbeknownst to investigators or Malaysia Airlines at the time, Flight 370 was still airborne at the time of this initial media statement, and search and rescue operations were commenced while the plane was still in flight over the Indian Ocean, albeit the search and rescue operations initially focused on the South China Sea, not the Indian Ocean where Flight 370 presumably crashed. The time when contact was lost was later corrected to 1:21. Neither the crew nor the aircraft's communication systems relayed a distress signal, indications of bad weather, or technical problems before the aircraft vanished from radar screens. On the 24th of March, Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak appeared before media at 2200 local time to give a statement regarding Flight 370, during which he announced that he had been briefed by the Air Accidents Investigation Branch that it and Inmarsat, the satellite data provider, had concluded that the airliner's last position before it disappeared was in the southern Indian Ocean. As no places exist where it could have landed, the aircraft must therefore have crashed into the sea. Just before Najib spoke at 2200 MYT, an emergency meeting was called in Beijing for relatives of Flight 370 passengers. Malaysia Airlines announced that Flight 370 was assumed lost with no survivors. It notified most of the families in person or via telephone, and some received an SMS, in English and Chinese, informing them that the aircraft likely had crashed with no survivors. On the 29th of January 2015, the Director General of the Department of Civil Aviation Malaysia, Azharuddin Abdul Rahman, announced that the status of Flight 370 would be changed to an accident, in accordance with the Chicago Convention on International Civil Aviation, and that all passengers and crew are presumed to have lost their lives. If the official assumption is confirmed, Flight 370 was, at the time of its disappearance, the deadliest aviation incident in the history of Malaysian Airlines, surpassing the 1977 hijacking and crash of Malaysian Airlines System Flight 653 that killed all 100 passengers and crew aboard, and the deadliest involving a Boeing 777, surpassing Asiana Airlines Flight 214, 3 fatalities. In both of those categories, Flight 370 was surpassed 131 days later by Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, another Boeing 777-200 which was shot down on the 17th of July 2014, killing all 298 people aboard. The news media reported several sightings of an aircraft fitting the description of the missing Boeing 777. For example, on the 19th of March 2014, CNN reported that witnesses including fishermen, an oil rig worker, and people on the Kudawadu Island in the Maldives saw the missing airliner. This plane was later identified as a Maldivian plane. A fisherman claimed to have seen an unusually low-flying aircraft off the coast of Kota Baru, while an oil rig worker 186 miles, 299 kilometers, southeast of Vung Tau claimed he saw a burning object in the sky that morning, a claim credible enough for the Vietnamese authorities to send a search and rescue mission, and Indonesian fishermen reported witnessing an aircraft crash near the Malacca Straits. 2 days later, the Malaysia-based The Star reported that a Malaysian woman claimed that she saw the stricken Malaysia Airlines plane partly submerged in the waters off the Andaman Islands on the day the jet disappeared. 3 months later, the Phuket Gazette reported that a British woman sailing in the Indian Ocean claimed to have seen an aircraft on fire. A search and rescue effort was launched in Southeast Asia soon after the disappearance of Flight 370. Following the initial analysis of communications between the aircraft and a satellite, the surface search was moved to the southern Indian Ocean 1 week after the aircraft's disappearance. Between the 18th of March and the 28th of April, 19 vessels and 345 sorties by military aircraft searched over 4,600,000 kilometers, 1,800,000 square miles. The final phase of the search was a bathymetric survey and sonar search of the seafloor, about 1,800 kilometers, 970 nmi, 1,100 mi, southwest of Perth, Western Australia. With effect from the 30th of March 2014, the search was coordinated by the Joint Agency Coordination Centre, JACC, an Australian government agency that was established specifically to manage the effort to locate and recover Flight 370, and which primarily involved the Malaysian, Chinese, and Australian governments. On the 17th of January 2017, the official search for Flight 370, which had proven to be the most expensive search operation in aviation history, was suspended after yielding no evidence of the aircraft other than some marine debris on the coast of Africa. The final ATSB report, published on the 17th of October 2017, stated that the underwater search for the aircraft, as of the 30th of June 2017, had cost a total of $155 million $194 million in 2024. The underwater search accounted for 86% of this amount, bathymetry 10%, and program management 4%. Malaysia had supported 58% of the total cost, Australia 32%, and China 10%. The report also concluded that the location where the aircraft went down had been narrowed to an area of 25,000 kilometers, 9,700 square miles, by using satellite images and debris drift analysis. In January 2018, the private American marine exploration company Ocean Infinity resumed the search for MH370 in the narrowed 25,000 kilometers area, using the Norwegian ship Seabed Constructor. The search area was significantly extended during the course of the search, and by the end of May 2018, the vessel had searched a total area of more than 112,000 kilometers, 43,000 square miles, using 8 autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs. The contract with the Malaysian government ended soon afterward, and the search was concluded without success on 9 June 2018. The Kuala Lumpur Aeronautical Rescue Coordination Center, ARCC, was activated at 5:30 MYT, 4 hours after communication was lost with the aircraft, to coordinate search and rescue efforts. Search efforts began in the Gulf of Thailand and the South China Sea. On the second day of the search, Malaysian officials said that radar recordings indicated that Flight 370 may have turned around before vanishing from radar screens. The search zone was expanded to include part of the Strait of Malacca. On the 12th of March, the chief of the Royal Malaysian Air Force announced that an unidentified aircraft, believed to be Flight 370, had traveled across the Malay Peninsula and was last sighted on military radar 370 kilometers, 200 nmi, 230 mi, northwest of the island of Penang. Search efforts were subsequently increased in the Andaman Sea and Bay of Bengal. Records of signals sent between the aircraft and a communications satellite over the Indian Ocean revealed that the plane had continued flying for almost 6 hours after its final sighting on Malaysian military radar. Initial analysis of these communications determined that Flight 370 was along one of 2 arcs, equidistant from the satellite, when its last signal was sent. On the 15th of March, the same day upon which the analysis was disclosed publicly, authorities announced that they would abandon search efforts in the South China Sea, Gulf of Thailand, and Strait of Malacca in order to focus their efforts on the 2 corridors. The northern arc, from northern Thailand to Kazakhstan, was soon discounted, for the aircraft would have had to pass through heavily militarized airspace, and those countries claimed that their military radar would have detected an unidentified aircraft entering their airspace. The emphasis of the search was shifted to the southern Indian Ocean west of Australia and within Australia's aeronautical and maritime search and rescue regions that extend to 75 degrees east longitude. Accordingly, on the 17th of March, Australia agreed to manage the search in the southern locus from Sumatra to the southern Indian Ocean. From 18 to the 27th of March 2014, the search effort focused on a 315,000 kilometers, 122,000 square miles, area about 2,600 kilometers, 1,400 nmi, 1,600 mi, southwest of Perth. The search area, which Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott called, as close to nowhere as it's possible to be, is renowned for its strong winds, inhospitable climate, hostile seas, and deep ocean floors. Satellite imagery of the region was analyzed. Several objects of interest and 2 possible debris fields were identified on images made between 16 and the 26th of March. None of these possible objects were found by aircraft or ships. Revised estimates of the radar track and the aircraft's remaining fuel led to a move of the search 1,100 kilometers, 590 nmi, 680 mi, northeast of the previous area on the 28th of March, which was followed by another shift on the 4th of April. Between 2 and the 17th of April, an effort was made to detect the underwater locator beacons, ULBs, informally known as pingers, attached to the aircraft's flight recorders, because the beacon's batteries were expected to expire around the 7th of April. Australian naval cutter ADV Ocean Shield, equipped with a towed pinger locator, TPL, joined China's Haixin 01, equipped with a handheld hydrophone, and the Royal Navy's HMS Echo, equipped with a hull-mounted hydrophone, in the search. Operators considered the effort to have little chance of success given the vast search area and the fact that a TPL can only search up to 130 kilometers, 50 mi, per day. Between 4 and the 8th of April, several acoustic detections were made that were close to the frequency and rhythm of the sound emitted by the flight recorder's ULBs. Analysis of the acoustic detections determined that, although unlikely, the detections could have come from a damaged ULB. A sonar search of the seafloor near the detections was carried out between the 14th of April and the 28th of May but yielded no sign of Flight 370. In a March 2015 report, it was revealed that the battery of the ULB attached to Flight 370's flight data recorder may have expired in December 2012 and thus may not have been as capable of sending signals as would an unexpired battery. In late June 2014, details of the next phase of the search were announced. Officials have called this phase the underwater search, despite the previous seafloor sonar survey. Continued refinement of the analysis of Flight 370's satellite communications identified a wide area search along the 7th arc, where Flight 370 was located when it last communicated with the satellite. The priority search area was in the southern extent of the wide area search. Some of the equipment used for the underwater search is most effective when towed 200 meters, 650 feet, above the seafloor at the end of a 9.7 kilometers, 6 miles, cable. Available bathymetric data for this region was of poor resolution, thus necessitating a bathymetric survey of the search area before the underwater phase began. Commencing in May, the survey charted around 208,000 kilometers, 80,000 square miles, of seafloor until the 17th of December 2014, when it was suspended so that the ship conducting the survey could be mobilized in the underwater search. The governments of Malaysia, China, and Australia made a joint commitment to thoroughly search 120,000 kilometers, 46,000 square miles, of seafloor. This phase of the search, which began on the 6th of October 2014, used 3 vessels equipped with towed deep-water vehicles that use side-scan sonar, multi-beam echo sounders, and video cameras to locate and identify aircraft debris. A 4th vessel participated in the search between January and May 2015, using an AUV to search areas that could not be effectively searched using equipment on the other vessels. Following the discovery of the flaperon on Réunion, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, ATSB, reviewed its drift calculations for debris from the aircraft and, according to the JACC, was satisfied that the search area was still the most likely crash site. Reverse drift modeling of the debris, to determine its origin after 16 months, also supported the underwater search area, although this method is very imprecise over long periods. On the 17th of January 2017, the 3 countries jointly announced the suspension of the search for Flight 370. On the 17th of October 2017, Dutch-based Fugro and American company Ocean Infinity offered to resume the search for the aircraft. In January 2018, Ocean Infinity announced that it was planning to resume the search in the narrowed 25,000 kilometers, 9,700 square miles, area. The search attempt was approved by the Malaysian government, provided that payment would be made only if the wreckage were found. Ocean Infinity chartered the Norwegian ship Seabed Constructor to perform the search. In late January, it was reported that the ice tracking system had detected the vessel reaching the search zone on the 21st of January. The vessel then started moving to 35.6 degrees south 92.8 degrees east, the most likely crash site according to the drift study by the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, CSIRO. The planned search area of Site 1, where the search began, was 33,012 kilometers, 12,746 square miles, while the extended search area covered a further 48,500 kilometers, 18,700 square miles. In April, a report by Ocean Infinity revealed that Site 4 inches, farther northeast along the 7th arc, had been added to the search plan. By the end of May 2018, the vessel had searched a total area of over 112,000 kilometers, 43,000 square miles, using 8 AUVs, all areas of Site 1 inch, including areas beyond that originally planned for Site 1, Site 2, and Site 3 inches had been searched. The final phase of the search was conducted in Site 4 inches in May 2018, before the weather limits Ocean Infinity's ability to continue working this year. Malaysia's new Transport Minister Loke Su Fook announced on the 23rd of May 2018 that the search for MH370 would conclude at the end of the month. Ocean Infinity confirmed on the 31st of May that its contract with the Malaysian government had ended, and it was reported on the 9th of June 2018 that the Ocean Infinity search had come to an end. Ocean floor mapping data collected during the search has been donated to the Nippon Foundation Gebka Seabed 2030 project, to be incorporated into the global map of the ocean floor. In March 2019, in the wake of the 5th anniversary of the disappearance, the Malaysian government stated that it was willing to look at any credible leads or specific proposals regarding a new search. Ocean Infinity stated that it was ready to resume the search on the same no-find, no-fee basis, believing that it would benefit from the experience that it had gained from its search for the wreck of Argentinian submarine Era San Juan and bulk carrier ship Stellar Daisy. Ocean Infinity believed that the most probable location was still somewhere along the 7th arc around the area identified previously and upon which its 2018 search was based. In March 2022, Ocean Infinity committed to resuming its search in 2023 or 2024 pending approval by the Malaysian government. In 2023, Ocean Infinity was reviewing data from their previous 2018 search to ensure nothing was missed. CEO Oliver Plunkett hoped to resume the search in mid-2023 using Ocean Infinity's new Armada vessel. The Transportation Minister of Malaysia, Wee Ka Siong, requested credible new evidence from Ocean Infinity in order to resume the search, which Plunkett was allegedly in possession of. Claims of yet to be identified new evidence has incited victims' families to further push for another search. In March 2024, days before the 10th anniversary of the disappearance, Malaysia said it would consult with Australia about collaborating on another expedition by the Ocean Infinity team. On the 2nd of May 2024, Ocean Infinity sent Malaysian Minister of Transport Anthony Loke a proposal for a new MH370 underwater search. On the 20th of December 2024, the Malaysian government announced that it would resume the search for MH370 and that it would be carried out by Ocean Infinity to cover a 15,000 square km area in the southern Indian Ocean. It was expected to cost $70 million, £56 million, but, as with the 2018 search, this search would be on a no find, no fee basis. On the 25th of February 2025, Minister of Transport Loke confirmed that Ocean Infinity had resumed the search. Subsequently, however, on the 3rd of April 2025, Loke announced that Ocean Infinity had suspended its search due to seasonal weather conditions but that they will resume the search at the end of this year. On the 3rd of December 2025, the Malaysian Transport Ministry issued an official statement confirming that search operations for MH370 would resume on the 30th of December 2025 for a total of 55 days. The search was conducted intermittently in targeted areas assessed to have the highest probability of locating the aircraft, in line with the service agreement signed between the Malaysian government and Ocean Infinity on the 25th of March 2025. Ocean Infinity conducted the search on a no find, no fee basis, with the company undertaking to search a new 5,800 square mile, 15,000 km, ocean area and to be paid $70 million, £52 million, only if wreckage is discovered. The search formally resumed on the 31st of December, with the Armada 8605 leaving the port of Fremantle, Western Australia assisted by 2 autonomous underwater vehicles. It concluded on the 23rd of January 2026 without success. By October 2017, 20 pieces of debris believed to be from 9 MMRO had been recovered from beaches in the Western Indian Ocean. 18 of the items were identified as being very likely or almost certain to originate from MH370. While the other 2 were assessed as probably from the accident aircraft. On the 16th of August 2017, the ATSB released 2 reports, the analysis of satellite imagery collected on the 23rd of March 2014, 2 weeks after MH370 disappeared, classifying 12 objects in the ocean as probably man-made, and a drift study of the recovered objects by the CSIRO, identifying the crash area, with unprecedented precision and certainty, at 35.6 degrees south 92.8 degrees east, northeast of the main 120,000 kilometers, 46,000 miles, underwater search zone. The first item of debris to be positively identified as originating from Flight 370 was the right flaperon, a trailing edge control surface. It was discovered in late July 2015 on a beach in Saint Andre, Réunion, an island in the western Indian Ocean, about 4,000 kilometers, 2,200 nmi, 2,500 mi, west of the underwater search area. The item was transported from Réunion, an overseas department of France, to Toulouse, where it was examined by France's Civil Aviation Accident Investigation Agency, the Bureau of Enquiry and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety, B, and a French Defense Ministry laboratory. Malaysia sent its own investigators to both Réunion and Toulouse. On the 3rd of September 2015, French officials announced that serial numbers found on internal components of the flaperon linked it, with certainty, to Flight 370. These serial numbers were retrieved using a borescope. After the discovery, French police conducted a search of the waters around Réunion for additional debris. This found a damaged suitcase that was initially linked to Flight 370, but officials have since doubted this connection. The location of the discovery was consistent with models of debris dispersal 16 months after an origin in the search area then in progress off the west coast of Australia. A Chinese water bottle and an Indonesian cleaning product were also found in the same area. In August 2015, France carried out an aerial search for possible marine debris around the island, covering an area of 120 by 40 kilometers, 75 by 25 mi, along the east coast of Réunion. Foot patrols were also planned to search for debris along the beaches. Malaysia asked authorities in neighboring states to be on the alert for marine debris that might have come from an aircraft. On the 14th of August, it was announced that no debris that could be traced to Flight 370 had been found at sea off Réunion, but that some items had been found on land. Air and sea searches for debris ended on the 17th of August. The flaperon was covered in Lepus anatifera barnacles, which grow in certain patterns and only while underwater. Researchers have analyzed the barnacles on the flaperon in an attempt to deduce its path to Réunion. In late February 2016, an object bearing a stenciled label of "No Step" was found off the coast of Mozambique. Early photographic analysis suggested that it could have come from the aircraft's horizontal stabilizer or from the leading edges of the wings. The part was found by Blaine Gibson on a sandbank in the Bazaruto archipelago off the coast of Vilanculos in southern Mozambique, around 2,000 kilometers, 1,200 mi, southwest of where the flaperon had been found the previous July. The fragment was sent to Australia, where experts identified it as almost certainly a horizontal stabilizer panel from 9 mmRO. In December 2015, Liam Lauder had found a grey piece of debris on a beach in southern Mozambique, but only after reading in March 2016 about Gibson's find, some 300 kilometers, 190 mi, from his own, did his family alert authorities. The piece was flown to Australia for analysis. It carried a stenciled code 676EB, which identified it as part of a Boeing 777 flap track fairing, and the style of lettering matched that of stencils used by Malaysia Airlines, making it almost certain that the part came from 9 mmRO. The locations where the objects were found are consistent with the drift model performed by CSIRO, further corroborating that the parts could have come from Flight 370. On the 7th of March 2016, more debris, possibly from the aircraft, was found on the island of Réunion. A Flat Aziz Kaprawi, Malaysia's deputy transport minister, said that an unidentified grey item with a blue border might be linked to Flight 370. Both Malaysian and Australian authorities, coordinating the search in the South Indian Ocean, sent teams to verify whether the debris was from the missing aircraft. On the 21st of March 2016, South African archaeologist Niels Kruger found a grey piece of debris on a beach near Mossel Bay, South Africa, that had an unmistakable partial logo of Rolls-Royce, the manufacturer of the missing aircraft's engines. The Malaysian Ministry of Transport acknowledged that the piece could be that of an engine cowling. An additional piece of possible debris, suggested to have come from the interior of the aircraft, was found on the island of Rodrigues, Mauritius, in late March. On the 11th of May 2016, Australian authorities determined that the two pieces of debris were, almost certainly, from Flight 370. On the 24th of June 2016, Australian Transport Minister Darren Chester said that a piece of aircraft debris had been found on Pemba Island, off the coast of Tanzania. It was handed over to the authorities so that experts from Malaysia could determine its origin. On the 20th of July, the Australian government released photographs of the piece, which was believed to be an outboard flap from one of the aircraft's wings. Malaysia's Transport Ministry confirmed on the 15th of September that the debris was indeed from the missing aircraft. On the 21st of November 2016, families of the victims announced that they would carry out a search for debris in December on the island of Madagascar. On the 30th of November 2018, 5 pieces of debris recovered between December 2016 and August 2018 on the Malagasy coast, and believed by victims' relatives to be from MH370, were handed to Malaysian Transport Minister Anthony Loke. Texas A&M University mathematics professor Gung Chen has argued that the plane may have entered the sea vertically. Any other angle of entry would make the aircraft splinter into many pieces, which would have been found already. Malaysia quickly assembled a joint investigation team, JIT, consisting of specialists from Malaysia, China, the United Kingdom, the United States, and France, which was led in accordance with ICAO standards by an independent investigator in charge. The team consisted of an airworthiness group, an operations group, and a medical and human factors group. The airworthiness group were tasked with examining issues relating to maintenance records, structures, and systems of the aircraft. The operations group were to review the flight recorders, operations, and meteorology, and the medical and human factors group would investigate psychological, pathological, and survival factors. Malaysia also announced, on the 6th of April 2014, that it had set up 3 ministerial committees, a next of kin committee, a committee to organize the formation of the JIT, and a committee responsible for the Malaysian assets deployed in the search effort. The criminal investigation was led by the Royal Malaysia Police, assisted by Interpol and other relevant international law enforcement authorities. On the 17th of March, Australia took control of coordinating the search, rescue, and recovery operations. For the next 6 weeks, the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, AMSA, and ATSB worked to determine the search area, correlating information with the JIT and other government and academic sources, while the Joint Agency Coordination Center, JACC, coordinated the search efforts. Following the 4th phase of the search, the ATSB took responsibility for defining the search area. In May, a search strategy working group was established by the ATSB to determine the most likely position of the aircraft at the 019 Coordinated Universal Time, 8:19 MYT, satellite transmission. The working group included aircraft and satellite experts from Air Accidents Investigation Branch, UK, Boeing, US, Defence Science and Technology Group, Australia, Department of Civil Aviation, Malaysia, Inmarsat, UK, National Transportation Safety Board, US, and Thales, France. As of October 2018, France was the only country that was continuing the investigation, by means of its air transport gendarmerie, with the intention of verifying all of the technical data transmitted, particularly those provided by Inmarsat. In 2024, researchers at Cardiff University in the United Kingdom conducted a study on underwater hydrophone signals generated by airplane crashes in the ocean. The researchers claimed that these signals could be key to detecting the final resting place of MH370, potentially bringing the UK back into the search efforts. 2 interim reports were issued in the 8th of March 2015 and March 2016. They contained factual information about the plane but no analysis. The final report from the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, published on the 3rd of October 2017, was 440 pages and called for planes to be equipped with more precise flight tracking technology. The final report from the Malaysian Ministry of Transport was 1,500 pages, released on the 30th of July 2018. It confirmed that the plane was manually turned around, taking it off its normal flight path just after 1 o'clock MYT, either by the pilot or a third party, and that the plane was missing for 20 minutes before anyone was alerted. Following these accounts of air traffic control failings, the chairman of the Civil Aviation Authority of Malaysia, Azharuddin Abdul Rahman, resigned on 31 July 2018. The communications between Flight 370 and the satellite communication network operated by Inmarsat, which were relayed by the Inmarsat 3F1 satellite, provide the only significant clues to the location of Flight 370 after disappearing from Malaysian military radar at 2:22 MYT. These communications have also been used to infer possible in-flight events. The investigative team was challenged with reconstructing the flight path of Flight 370 from a limited set of transmissions with no explicit information about the aircraft's location, heading, or speed. Aeronautical satellite communication, SATCOM, systems are used to transmit messages sent from the aircraft cockpit, as well as automated data signals from onboard equipment, using the ACARS communications protocol. SATCOM may also be used for the transmission of FANS and ATN messages, and for providing voice, fax and data links using other protocols. The aircraft uses a satellite data unit, SDU, to send and receive signals over the satellite communications network. This operates independently from the other onboard systems that communicate via SATCOM, mostly using the ACARS protocol. Signals from the SDU are transmitted to a communications satellite, which amplifies the signal and changes its frequency before relaying it to a ground station, where the signal is processed and, if applicable, routed to its intended destination, e.g. Malaysia Airlines Operations Center. Signals are sent from the ground to the aircraft in reverse order. When the SDU is first powered on, it attempts to connect with the Inmarsat network by transmitting a logon request, which is acknowledged by the ground station. This is partly to determine whether the SDU belongs to an active service subscriber, and also to identify which satellite should be used for transmitting messages to the SDU. After connecting, if no further contact has been received from the data terminal, the SDU, for 1 hour, the ground station transmits a logon interrogation message, commonly referred to as a ping. If the terminal is active, it will respond to the ping automatically. The entire process of interrogating the terminal is referred to as a handshake. Although the ACARS data link on Flight 370 stopped functioning between 1:07 and 2:03 MYT, most likely around the same time the plane lost contact by secondary radar, the SDU remained operative. After last contact by primary radar west of Malaysia, the following events were recorded in the log of Inmarsat's ground station at Perth, Western Australia. All times are MYT, UTC +8, 2 hours 25 minutes and 27 seconds first handshake. Logon request. Initiated by aircraft, 2 hours 39 minutes and 52 seconds ground to aircraft telephone call, acknowledged by SDU, unanswered. 3 hours 41 minutes and 0 seconds second handshake. Initiated by ground station, 4 hours 41 minutes and 2 seconds third handshake. Initiated by ground station, 5 hours 41 minutes and 24 seconds fourth handshake. Initiated by ground station, 6 hours 41 minutes and 19 seconds fifth handshake. Initiated by ground station, 7 hours 13 minutes and 58 seconds ground to aircraft telephone call, acknowledged by SDU, unanswered. 8 hours 10 minutes and 58 seconds sixth handshake. Initiated by ground station, 8 hours 19 minutes and 29 seconds seventh handshake. Initiated by aircraft, widely reported as a partial handshake, consisting of the following two transmissions. 8 hours 19 minutes and 29 seconds. 416, logon request, message transmitted by aircraft. 7th, partial handshake, 8 hours 19 minutes and 37 seconds. 443, logon acknowledge, message transmitted by aircraft. Last transmission received from Flight 370. A few inferences can be made from the satellite communications. The first is that the aircraft remained operational until at least 8:19 MYT, 7 hours after final contact was made with air traffic control over the South China Sea. The varying burst frequency offset, BFO, values indicate the aircraft was moving at speed. The aircraft's SDU needs location and track information to keep its antenna pointed towards the satellite, so it can also be inferred that the aircraft's navigation system was operational. Since the aircraft did not respond to a ping at 9:15, it can be concluded that at some point between 8:19 and 9:15, the aircraft lost the ability to communicate with the ground station. The logon message sent from the aircraft at 8 hours 19 minutes and 29 seconds was logon request. There are only a few reasons the SDU would transmit this request, such as a power interruption, software failure, loss of critical systems providing input to the SDU, or a loss of the link due to the aircraft's attitude. Investigators consider the most likely reason to be that it was sent during power-up after an electrical outage. The log-on request sent earlier in the flight at 2:25 also reveals that the satellite communication system was offline from some point after the final ACARS transmission at 1:06 until 2:25, possibly due to a power interruption. However, it is not known why the satellite system booted back up at 2:25 after being offline for some time. At 8:19, the aircraft had been airborne for 7 hours and 38 minutes. The typical Kuala Lumpur-Beijing flight is 51/2 of an hour, so fuel exhaustion was likely. In the event of fuel exhaustion and engine flame out, which would eliminate power to the SDU, the aircraft's ram air turbine, RAT, would deploy, providing power to some instruments and flight controls, including the SDU. Approximately 90 seconds after the 2:25 handshake, also a log-on request, communications from the aircraft's in-flight entertainment system were recorded in the ground station log. Similar messages would be expected following the 8:19 handshake, but none were received, supporting the fuel exhaustion scenario. Two parameters associated with these transmissions that were recorded in a log at the ground station were key to the investigation. Burst time offset, BTO. The time difference between when a signal is sent from the ground station and when the response is received. This measure is proportional to twice the distance from the ground station via the satellite to the aircraft and includes the time that the SDU takes between receiving and responding to the message and time between reception and processing at the ground station. This measure was analyzed to determine the distance between the satellite and the aircraft at the time each of the 7 handshakes occurred, and thereby defining 7 circles on the Earth's surface, the points on whose circumference are equidistant from the satellite at the calculated distance. Those circles were then reduced to arcs by eliminating those parts of each circle that lay outside the aircraft's range. Burst frequency offset, BFO. The difference between the expected and received frequency of transmissions. The difference is caused by Doppler shifts as the signals traveled from the aircraft to the satellite to the ground station. The frequency translations made in the satellite and at the ground station. A small, constant error, bias, in the SDU that results from drift and aging, and compensation applied by the SDU to counter the Doppler shift on the uplink. This measure was analyzed to determine the aircraft's speed and heading, but multiple combinations of speed and heading can be valid solutions. By combining the distance between the aircraft and satellite, speed, and heading with aircraft performance constraints, e.g. fuel consumption, possible speeds and altitudes, investigators generated candidate paths that were analyzed separately by 2 methods. The first assumed the aircraft was flying on one of the 3 autopilot modes. 2 are further affected by whether the navigation system used magnetic north or true north as a reference, calculated the BTO and BFO values along these routes, and compared them with the values recorded from Flight 370. The second method generated paths which had the aircraft's speed and heading adjusted at the time of each handshake to minimize the difference between the calculated BFO of the path and the values recorded from Flight 370. A probability distribution for each method at the BTO arc of the 6th handshake of the 2 methods was created and then compared. 80% of the highest probability paths for both analyses combined intersect the BTO arc of the 6th handshake between 32.5 degrees south and 38.1 degrees south, which can be extrapolated to 33.5 degrees south and 38.3 degrees south along the BTO arc of the 7th handshake. In May 2024, researchers at Cardiff University raised questions about the official location and the time of the impact in scientific reports. Usama Kadri stated that hydrophone data relating to MH370's crash identified only a single, relatively weak signal within the time frame and location of the official search, unlike the clear pressure signals shown in previous accidents data with such impact. He also noted that it is implausible to imagine that a significant crash of an aircraft on the ocean surface would fail to generate a discernible pressure signature, suggesting that controlled explosion experiments could almost pinpoint the aircraft's location, or possibly raise the need to reassess the time frame or location currently established. Malaysian police investigated the homes of the pilots and examined the financial records of all 12 crew members. According to the preliminary report released by Malaysia in March 2015, there was no evidence of recent or imminent significant financial transactions carried out by any pilot or crew member. Additionally, analysis of the pilot's behavior on CCTV revealed no significant behavioral changes. Despite this, U.S. officials consider it likely that someone in the cockpit of Flight 370 reprogrammed the aircraft's autopilot to head south over the Indian Ocean. Media reports have claimed that Malaysian police identified Captain Zahari as the prime suspect, should human intervention be proven as the cause of the disappearance. In 2020, former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott stated in a Sky News documentary, "My very clear understanding, from the very top levels of the Malaysian government, is that from very, very early on, they thought it was murder self-killing by the pilot." In 2023, retired engineers and pilots Jean-Luc Marchand and Patrick Blely gave several conferences on the pilot's suicide theory, supporting this argument with extensive analysis and a detailed report published online. In 2016, New York Magazine wrote that a confidential document from the Malaysian police investigation showed an FBI analysis of the flight simulator's computer hard drive found a route on Captain Zahari's home flight simulator that closely matched the projected flight over the Indian Ocean, and that this evidence had been withheld from the publicly released investigative report. New York wrote as follows: New York has obtained a confidential document from the Malaysian police investigation into the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 that shows that the plane's captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, conducted a simulated flight deep into the remote southern Indian Ocean less than a month before the plane vanished under uncannily similar circumstances. The revelation, which Malaysia withheld from a lengthy public report on the investigation, is the strongest evidence yet that Zahari made off with the plane in a premeditated act of mass murder self-killing. Opening square bracket closing square bracket. The newly unveiled documents suggest Malaysian officials have suppressed at least one key piece of incriminating information. This is not entirely surprising. There is a history in aircraft investigations of national safety boards refusing to believe that their pilots could have intentionally crashed an aircraft full of passengers. The FBI's findings about the flight simulation were confirmed by the ATSB. News of the simulation was also confirmed by the Malaysian government, but reported as nothing sinister. The SATCOM link functioned normally from pre-flight, beginning at 0000 MYT, until it responded to a ground-to-air ACARS message with an acknowledge message at 107. At some time between 107 and 203, power was lost to the Satellite Data Unit, SDU. The final report stated, "It is likely that the loss of communication prior to the diversion is due to the systems being manually turned off or power interrupted to them." Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak said it was clear that the radar transponders and the flight data transmission system were turned off deliberately by someone trying to hide the plane's position and heading. At 2:25, the aircraft's SDU rebooted itself and sent a log on request. United States and Malaysian officials reviewed the backgrounds of every passenger named on the manifest. One passenger, who worked as a flight engineer for a Swiss jet charter company, was briefly under suspicion as a potential hijacker because he was thought to have the relevant aviation skills. Two men were found to have boarded Flight 370 with stolen passports, which raised suspicion in the immediate aftermath of its disappearance. The passports, one Austrian and one Italian, had been reported stolen in Thailand within the preceding 2 years. The two passengers were later identified as Iranian men, one aged 19 and the other 29, who had entered Malaysia on the 28th of February using valid Iranian passports. They were believed to be asylum seekers, and the Secretary General of Interpol later stated that the organization was inclined to conclude that it was not a terrorist incident. On the 18th of March, the Chinese government announced that it had checked all of the Chinese citizens on the aircraft and had ruled out the possibility that any were involved in destruction or terror attacks. Flight 370 was carrying 10,806 kilograms, 23,823 lb, of cargo, of which 4 unit load devices, standardized cargo containers, of mangosteens, a tropical fruit, total 4,566 kilograms or 10,066 lb, and 221 kilograms, 487 lb, of lithium-ion batteries were of interest, according to Malaysian investigators. According to the head of Malaysian police, Khalid Abu Bakar, the people who handled the mangosteens and the Chinese importers were questioned to rule out sabotage. The lithium-ion batteries were contained in a 2,453 kilograms, 5,408 lb, consignment being shipped from Motorola Solutions facilities in Bayan Lepas, Malaysia, to Tianjin, China. They were packaged in accordance with IATA guidelines, but did not go through any additional inspections at Kuala Lumpur International Airport before being loaded onto Flight 370. Lithium-ion batteries can cause intense fires if they overheat and ignite, which has occurred on other flights, and has led to strict regulations on transport aircraft. An analysis by the ATSB comparing the evidence available for Flight 370 with 3 categories of accidents: an in-flight upset, e.g., stall, a glide event, e.g., engine failure, fuel exhaustion, and an unresponsive crew or hypoxia event, concluded that an unresponsive crew or hypoxia event best fit the available evidence, For the 5-hour period of the flight as it traveled south over the Indian Ocean without communication or significant deviations in its track, likely on autopilot. No consensus exists among investigators on the unresponsive crew or hypoxia theory. If no control inputs were made following flameout and the disengagement of autopilot, the aircraft would likely have entered a spiral dive and entered the ocean within 20 nmi, 37 kilometers, 23 mi, of the flameout and disengagement of autopilot. The analysis of the flaperon showed that the landing flaps were not extended, supporting the spiral dive at high-speed theory. In May 2018, the ATSB again asserted that the flight was not in control when it crashed, its spokesperson adding that, "We have quite a bit of data to tell us that the aircraft, if it was being controlled at the end, it wasn't very successfully being controlled." Public communication from Malaysian officials regarding the loss of Flight 370 was initially beset with confusion. The Malaysian government and the airline released imprecise, incomplete, and occasionally inaccurate information, with civilian officials sometimes contradicting military leaders. Malaysian officials were criticized for such persistent release of contradictory information, most notably regarding the last location and time of contact with the aircraft. Malaysia's acting Transport Minister Hishamuddin Hussein, who was also the country's defense minister, until May 2018, denied the existence of problems between the participating countries, but academics explained that because of regional conflicts, there were genuine trust issues involved in cooperation and sharing intelligence, and that these were hampering the search. International relations experts suggested that entrenched rivalries over sovereignty, security, intelligence, and national interests made meaningful multilateral cooperation very difficult. A Chinese academic made the observation that the parties were searching independently, and it was therefore not a multilateral search effort. The Guardian newspaper noted the Vietnamese permission given for Chinese aircraft to overfly its airspace as a positive sign of cooperation. Vietnam temporarily scaled back its search operations after the country's deputy transport minister cited a lack of communication from Malaysian officials despite requests for more information. China, through the official Xinhua news agency, urged the Malaysian government to take charge and conduct the operation with greater transparency, a point echoed by the Chinese Foreign Ministry days later. Malaysia had initially declined to release raw data from its military radar, deeming the information too sensitive, but later acceded. Defense experts suggested that giving others access to radar information could be sensitive on a military level. For example, the rate at which they can take the picture can also reveal how good the radar system is. One suggested that some countries could already have had radar data on the aircraft, but were reluctant to share any information that could potentially reveal their defense capabilities and compromise their own security. Similarly, submarines patrolling the South China Sea might have information in the event of a water impact, and sharing such information could reveal their locations and listening capabilities. Criticism was also leveled at the delay of the search efforts. On the 11th of March 2014, 3 days after the aircraft disappeared, British satellite company Inmarsat, or its partner, SETA, had provided officials with data suggesting that the aircraft was nowhere near the areas in the Gulf of Thailand and the South China Sea being searched at the time, and that it may have diverted its course through a southern or northern corridor. This information was not acknowledged publicly until it was released by the Malaysian Prime Minister in a press conference on the 15th of March. Explaining why information about satellite signals had not been made available earlier, Malaysia Airlines stated that the raw satellite signals needed to be verified and analyzed, so that their significance could be properly understood, before it could publicly confirm their existence. Acting Transport Minister Hishamuddin claimed that Malaysian and U.S. investigators had immediately discussed the Inmarsat data upon receipt on the 12th of March, and that they had agreed to send the data to the U.S. for further processing on 2 separate occasions. Data analysis was completed on the 14th of March, by which time the AAIB had independently arrived at the same conclusion. In June 2014, relatives of passengers on Flight 370 began a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo to raise $100,000 $135,999 in 2025, with an ultimate goal of raising $5 million as a reward to encourage anyone with knowledge of the location of Flight 370, or the cause of its disappearance, to reveal what they knew. The campaign, which ended on the 8th of August 2014, raised $100,516 from 1,007 contributors. A month after the disappearance, Malaysia Airlines chief executive Ahmad Jauhari Yahya acknowledged that ticket sales had declined but failed to provide specific details. This may have partially resulted from the suspension of the airline's advertising campaigns following the disappearance. Ahmad stated in an interview with the Wall Street Journal that the airline's primary focus is that we do take care of the families in terms of their emotional needs and also their financial needs. It is important that we provide answers for them. It is important that the world has answers, as well. In further remarks, Ahmad said he was not sure when the airline could start repairing its image, but that the airline was adequately insured to cover the financial loss stemming from Flight 370's disappearance. In China, where the majority of passengers were from, bookings on Malaysia Airlines were down 60% in March. Malaysia Airlines retired the MH370 flight number and replaced it with MH318, Flight 318, beginning the 14th of March 2014. This follows a common practice among airlines to redesignate flights after notorious accidents. As of September 2025, Malaysia Airlines still operates the Kuala Lumpur-Beijing route as MH318, though the flight now lands into Beijing Daxing instead of Beijing Capital. Malaysia Airlines was given $110 million $143 million in 2024 from insurers in March 2014 to cover initial payments to passengers' families in the search effort. In May, remarks from lead reinsurer of the flight, Allianz, indicated the insured market loss on Flight 370, including the search, was about $350 million. In 2017, Malaysia Airlines announced that they are the first airline to sign up for a new service that would track its airplanes anywhere in the world using orbiting satellites. At the time of Flight 370's disappearance, Malaysia Airlines was struggling to cut costs to compete with a wave of new, low-cost carriers in the region. In the previous 3 years, Malaysia Airlines had booked losses of Rm 1.17 billion, $356 million in 2013, Rm 433 million in 2012, and Rm 2.5 billion in 2011. Malaysia Airlines lost Rm 443.4 million, $137.4 million in the first quarter of 2014, January to March. The second quarter, the first full quarter in the aftermath of Flight 370's disappearance, saw a loss of Rm 307.04 million, $97.6 million, representing a 75% increase over losses from the second quarter of 2013. Industry analysts expected Malaysia Airlines to lose further market share and face a challenging environment to stand out from competitors while addressing its financial plight. The company's stock, down as much as 20% following the disappearance of Flight 370, had fallen 80% over the previous 5 years, in contrast to a rise in the Malaysian stock market of about 80% over the same period. Many analysts and the media suggested that Malaysia Airlines would need to rebrand and repair its image and require government assistance to return to profitability. The loss of Flight 17 in July greatly exacerbated Malaysia Airlines' financial problems. The combined effect on consumer confidence of the loss of Flight 370 and Flight 17, and the airline's poor financial performance, led Khazanah Nasional, the majority shareholder, 69.37%, and a Malaysian state-run investment arm, to announce on the 8th of August its plan to purchase the remainder of the airline, thereby renationalizing it. Malaysia Airlines renationalized on the 1st of September 2015. Many Air Force experts raised questions and the Malaysian opposition leveled criticisms about the state of Malaysia's Air Force and radar capabilities. Many criticized the failure of the Royal Malaysian Air Force to identify and respond to an unidentified aircraft, later determined to be Flight 370, flying through Malaysian airspace. The Malaysian military became aware of the unidentified aircraft only after reviewing radar recordings several hours after the flight's disappearance. The failure to recognize and react to the unidentified aircraft was a security breach, and was also a missed opportunity to intercept Flight 370 and prevent the time-consuming and expensive search operation. The Malaysian Prime Minister, Najib Razak, responded to criticism of his government in an opinion piece published in the Wall Street Journal in which he acknowledged mistakes had been made, and said time would show that Malaysia had done its best, had helped coordinate the search, and would continue to provide support. Najib went on to emphasize the need for the aviation industry to not only learn the lessons of MH370 but implement them, saying in closing that the world learned from Air France Flight 447 but didn't act. The same mistake must not be made again. Opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim criticized the Malaysian government regarding its response to Flight 370's disappearance and the military's response when Flight 370 turned back over the Malay Peninsula. He called for an international committee to take charge of the investigation, to save the image of the country and to save the country. Malaysian authorities have accused Anwar, who was jailed on contentious charges the day before Flight 370 disappeared, of politicizing the crisis. Flight 370's captain was a supporter of Anwar, and the two men were acquainted. Questioned about why Malaysia did not scramble fighter jets to intercept the aircraft as it tracked back across the Malay Peninsula, Acting Transport Minister Hishamuddin noted that it was deemed a commercial aircraft and was not hostile, remarking, "If you're not going to shoot it down, what's the point of sending a fighter jet up?" According to former Air Force pilot Major Ahmad Zaidi of RMAF Butterworth, no pilot stays on the base during the night, so the aircraft could not have been intercepted. The response to the crisis and lack of transparency in the response brought attention to the state of media in Malaysia. After decades of tight media control, during which government officials were accustomed to passing over issues without scrutiny or accountability, Malaysia was suddenly thrust into the spotlight of the global media and unable to adjust to demands for transparency. On the 8th of March 2020, 6 years after the disappearance, two memorial events were held to mark the anniversary. Families of MH370 passengers called for a new search for the flight in a bid to seek closure. Malaysia's former Transport Minister Anthony Loke had attended one of the events, expressing regret at being unable to table the compensation documents at the cabinet level as per his original intent. The families hoped that the new Transport Minister Wee Ka Siong could expedite the compensation matters. Malaysia's Transport Ministry Secretary General, Datuk Isham Ishak, stated that he had already submitted a request to meet the Prime Minister, Muhyiddin Yassin, the following week of 15 to the 22nd of March so that he could present the paper on compensation for the families of MH370 victims, and that the ministry would also continue to seek support from the new government to resume the search for the missing aircraft. Chinese Deputy Foreign Minister Xie Hangxing reacted skeptically to the conclusion by the Malaysian government that the aircraft had gone down with no survivors, demanding on the 24th of March 2014 all the relevant information and evidence about the satellite data analysis, and said that the Malaysian government must finish all the work including search and rescue. The following day, Chinese President Xi Jinping sent a special envoy to Kuala Lumpur to consult with the Malaysian government over the missing aircraft. In the days following the disappearance of Flight 370, relatives of those on board became increasingly frustrated at the lack of news. On the 25th of March 2014, around 200 family members of the Chinese passengers protested outside the Malaysian embassy in Beijing. Relatives who had arrived in Kuala Lumpur after the announcement continued with their protest, accusing Malaysia of hiding the truth and harboring a murderer. They also wanted an apology from the Malaysian government for its poor initial handling of the disaster and its premature conclusion of total loss, drawn without any physical evidence. An op-ed in state media outlet China Daily said that Malaysia was not wholly to be blamed for its poor handling of such a bizarre and unprecedented crisis, and appealed to the Chinese relatives not to allow emotions to prevail over evidence and rationality. The Chinese ambassador to Malaysia defended the Malaysian government's response, stating that the radical and irresponsible opinions of the relatives do not represent the views of Chinese people and the Chinese government. The ambassador also strongly criticized Western media for having published false news, stoked conflict and even spread rumors to the detriment of relatives and of Sino-Malaysian relations. On the other hand, a U.S. Department of Defense official criticized China for what he perceived as providing apparently false leads that detracted from the search effort and wasted time and resources. In July 2019, Beijing-based family members of some MH370 victims received notice from Malaysia Airlines that from July 2019 onwards, MAS would discontinue the Meet the Families discussion sessions in Beijing, China. This came after around 50 sessions had taken place. Some Chinese citizens boycotted all things Malaysian, including holidays and singers, in protest of Malaysia's handling of the Flight 370 investigation. Bookings on Malaysia Airlines from China, where the majority of passengers were from, were down 60% in March. In late March, several major Chinese ticketing agencies, Elong, Li.com, Canar, and Mango, discontinued the sale of airline tickets to Malaysia, and several large Chinese travel agencies reported a 50% drop in tourists compared to the same period the year before. China was the third largest source of visitors to Malaysia prior to Flight 370's disappearance, accounting for 1.79 million tourists in 2013. One market analyst predicted a 20 to 40% drop in Chinese tourists to Malaysia, resulting in a loss of 4 to 8 billion yuan, RM 2.1 - 4.2 billion, 65 United States cents minus 1.3 billion. The boycotts were largely led or supported by celebrities. Film star Chen Kun posted a message to Weibo, where he had 70 million followers, stating that he would be boycotting Malaysia until its government told the truth. The post was shared over 70,000 times and drew over 30,000 comments. More than 337,000 people retweeted a tweet from TV host Meng Fei which said that he would join the boycott. China and Malaysia had previously nominated 2014 to be the Malaysia-China Friendship Year, to celebrate 40 years of diplomatic relations between the two countries. The International Air Transport Association, IATA, an industry trade organization representing more than 240 airlines, accounting for 84% of global air traffic, and the ICAO began working on implementing new measures to track aircraft in flight in real time. The IATA created a task force, which included several outside stakeholders, to define a minimal set of requirements that any tracking system must meet, allowing airlines to decide the best solution to track their aircraft. The IATA's task force planned to come up with several short, medium, and long-term solutions to ensure that information is provided in a timely manner to support search, rescue, and recovery activities in the wake of an aircraft accident. The task force was expected to provide a report to the ICAO on the 30th of September 2014, but announced on that date that the report would be delayed, citing the need for further clarification on some issues. In December 2014, the IATA task force recommended that, within 12 months, airlines track commercial aircraft in no longer than 15-minute intervals. The IATA itself did not support the deadline, which it believed could not be met by all airlines, but the proposed standard had the support of the ICAO. Although the ICAO can set standards, it has no legal authority, and such standards must be adopted by member states. In 2016, the ICAO adopted a standard that, by November 2018, all aircraft over open ocean report their position every 15 minutes. In March, the ICAO approved an amendment to the Chicago Convention requiring new aircraft manufactured after the 1st of January 2021 to have autonomous tracking devices which could send location information at least once per minute in distress circumstances. In May 2014, Inmarsat said that it would offer its tracking service for free to all aircraft equipped with an Inmarsat satellite connection, which includes the vast majority of commercial airliners. Inmarsat also changed the time period for handshakes with its terminals from 1 hour to 15 minutes. After the terrorist attacks of the 11th of September 2001, calls were made for transponders to become automated rather than manually operated. No changes were made because aviation experts preferred flexible control, in case of malfunctions or electrical emergencies. In the aftermath of Flight 370's disappearance, the air transport industry was still resistant to the installation of automated transponders, which would likely entail significant costs. Pilots also criticized changes of this kind, insisting on the need to cut power to equipment in the event of a fire. Nonetheless, new types of tamper-proof circuit breakers were being considered. The intensive and urgent search for the flight recorders in early April 2014, due to the 30-day battery life of the underwater locator beacons, ULBs, or pingers, attached to them, drew attention to their inherent limitations. The maximum distance from the ULBs at which the signal can be detected is normally 2,000 to 3,000 meters, 6,600 to 9,800 feet, or 4,500 meters, 14,800 feet, under favorable conditions. Even if the flight recorders are located, the cockpit voice recorder memory has the capacity to store only 2 hours of data, continuously recording over the oldest data. This storage capacity complies with regulations, which take account of the fact that it is usually only the data recordings from the last section of a flight that are needed to determine the cause of an accident. However, the events that led to Flight 370 diverting from its course, before disappearing, took place more than 2 hours before the flight ended. Given these shortcomings, and the importance of the data stored on flight recorders, Flight 370 has brought to attention new technologies that enable data streaming to the ground. A call to increase the battery life of ULBs was made following the unsuccessful initial search in 2009 for the flight recorders on Air France Flight 447, which were not located until 2011. A formal recommendation that the ULB design be upgraded to offer a longer battery life, or to make the recorders ejectable, had been included in the final report of the Board of Inquiry into the loss of South African Airways Flight 295 over the Indian Ocean in 1987, but it was not until 2014 that the ICAO made such a recommendation, with implementation required by 2018. The European Aviation Safety Agency, EASA, issued new regulations that require the transmitting time of ULBs fitted to aircraft flight recorders to be increased from 30 to 90 days, to be implemented by the 1st of January 2020. The agency has also proposed that a new underwater locator beacon with a greater range of transmission should be fitted to aircraft that fly over oceans. In June 2015, Duquesne, a manufacturer of underwater locator beacons, began selling beacons with a 90-day battery life. In March 2016, the ICAO adopted several amendments to the Chicago Convention in order to address issues raised by the disappearance of Flight 370. These affected aircraft manufactured after 2020, requiring cockpit voice recorders to record at least 25 hours of data, to ensure that all phases of a flight are recorded. Aircraft designs approved after 2020 must incorporate a means of recovering the flight recorders, or the information contained on them, before the recorders sink below the water. This provision is performance-based so that it can be accomplished by different techniques, such as streaming flight recorder data from a stricken aircraft, or using flight recorders that eject from the aircraft and float on the surface of the water. The new regulations do not require modifications to be made to existing aircraft. In January 2015, the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board cited Flight 370 and Air France Flight 447 when it issued 8 safety recommendations related to locating aircraft wreckage in remote or underwater locations, and repeated recommendations for a crash-protected cockpit image recorder and tamper-resistant flight recorders and transponders. The search for a crashed passenger aircraft in the remote Southeast Indian Ocean led to significant scientific advances beyond its original aim. The region's isolation and limited prior exploration allowed the Australian Institute to use the search effort to investigate a largely unknown area of deep seafloor. High-resolution shipborne sonar, or MBES mapping revealed that the seabed is far more complex than earlier satellite-based models suggested. Instead of a flat and uniform surface, the new data show a rugged landscape shaped by diverse geological processes. The surveys identified numerous previously unrecognized features, including seamounts, submarine canyons, sedimentary structures, and underwater depressions. Evidence of seafloor spreading, rifting, active sediment transport, and fluid release was also observed, indicating an active geological history. These new discoveries revise understanding of the geological evolution of the Southeast Indian Ocean and highlight the deep ocean as a structurally diverse environment, and revealed complexity also suggests increased potential for varied deep-sea habitats and biodiversity. The disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 has been described as one of the biggest mysteries in modern aviation history. Several documentaries have been produced about the flight. The Smithsonian Channel aired a 1-hour documentary on 6 April 2014, titled Malaysia 370, The Plane That Vanished, and the Discovery Channel broadcast a 1-hour documentary about Flight 370 on 16 April 2014, titled Flight 370, The Missing Links. On 17 June 2014, an episode of the television documentary series Horizon, titled, Where is Flight MH370? Was broadcast on BBC Two. The program documents how the aircraft disappeared, what experts believe to have happened to it, and how the search has unfolded. It also examines new technologies, such as flight recorder streaming and automatic dependent surveillance, broadcast, ADS-B, which may help prevent similar disappearances in the future. The program concludes by noting that Ocean Shield had spent 2 months searching 850 kilometers, 330 miles, of ocean, but that it had searched far to the north of the Inmarsat hotspot, on the final arc, at approximately 28 degrees south, where the aircraft was most likely to have crashed. On 8 October 2014, a modified version of the Horizon program was broadcast in the US by PBS as an episode of Nova, titled, Why Planes Vanish. The aviation disaster documentary television series Mayday, also known as Air Crash Investigation and Air Emergency, produced an episode on the disaster, titled, What Happened to Malaysian 370. The episode aired in the UK on 8 March 2015, the first anniversary of Flight 370's disappearance. In August 2018, the television series Drain the Oceans, which airs on the National Geographic Channel, highlighted the disaster, the methods used in the search, and the potential discoveries. Panoply made a podcast story loosely based on the disappearance of MH370, called Passenger List. Kelly Marie Tran played the lead character. Jeff Rake, creator of the NBC show Manifest, said that after he had pitched his idea for the show without any success, the MH370 disappearance led to the TV network's sudden interest. The first work of fiction about the incident was MH370, a novella, by New Zealand author Scott McCaw. In 2022, a 3-part documentary series, titled MH370, The Lost Flight, was released. On the 9th anniversary of the flight's disappearance, the 8th of March 2023, a three-part docuseries, MH370, The Plane That Disappeared, premiered on Netflix. In 2023, American comedian Jocelyn Chia was investigated by Malaysian police for breaching Malaysian laws relating to incitement and offensive online content, after making a joke about the flight at Comedy Cellar in New York City. Akril Sani Abdullah Sani, chief of the Malaysian police, said an application would be filed to Interpol to find Chia's full identity and latest location. A video of her stand-up performance was removed from TikTok for violating the platform's hate speech guidelines. The Singaporean ambassador to Malaysia stated that Chia, who grew up in Singapore, did not speak for Singaporeans. Vivian Balakrishnan, Singaporean foreign minister, called Chia's joke horrendous statements. Chia stood by the joke, stating that it was being taken out of context and had been performed over 100 times without complaints before.